Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Alchemist. So Alchemist is primarily a carry hero, and his main focus is going to be farming faster than any other hero in the game. And in the past, actually, that was pretty much all he did. He would just farm for 15, 20, 25 minutes or something like that, hit these item timings, and then try to end the game, but then he would fall off pretty quickly if he wasn't able to end early. Like, he didn't have as much of a late game presence as he now does. Now they've kind of shifted the balance a little bit, where he is a little bit more effective late game, but he also doesn't farm as quickly as he once did. But still, you can think of Alchemist in the same kind of way, where he loves to play from ahead, he loves to farm early and get these item timings that other carries can't get, and he hits his peak strength faster than most other carries. And then in the later portion of the game now, the main way that you kind of impact the game is by buying ag scepters for your teammates to kind of, shift the gold that you're getting to other people, so it's not just all on yourself and it feels a little bit useless like it used to. So now that's really the way that he has impact later if you don't hit that timing and win the game early. But before we can understand how to play Alchemist fully, we have to look at his abilities. So the two facets for Alchemist are Seed Money, and this one is basically just giving you gold at the start of the match, which is pretty much for any kind of carry or mid-style farm-heavy Alchemist. And then Mixologist, which gives you a lower cooldown on Unstable Concoction and Berserk Potion when you have your ultimate running. And so we'll take a look at all those abilities in a bit, but this is for more of the support or kind of off-lane style Alchemist, which isn't always very popular, but sometimes it comes into the meta. It is sort of viable, and this gives you a way to make that a little bit better. But for the most part, this kind of farming Alchemist is the focus of the hero. And that's also because this Grievel's Greed passive, which used to be an actual ability, is now what gives this hero the ability to just farm super quickly. And you also don't have to put points into this anymore like you used to, so that allows him to kind of scale a little bit better into the late game as well, like I said before. But really straightforwardly, this ability, this passive, just means every time you last hit a creep, you just get more gold. Now you can read this, look into how much more gold and how effective it is at various things, but really you just want to get more last hits overall because that equals more gold. And so any kind of creeps that are like the skeletons that spawn, or any kind of neutral camp that has a lot of individual units, that's going to be better for Alchemist than just hitting big creeps like Ancients. Although he can still do Ancients, that's still really good. Stacking them is still great. It's not that that's bad, but little creeps are more valuable to this guy than pretty much any other hero in the game, because sometimes those little ones, they don't give much gold. Who really cares? For Alchemist, it's a big deal actually. So that's Grievel's Greed. Now let's jump into looking at all of his other abilities. So now that we understand Alchemist in general, let's take a look at his abilities. And the first ability we're going to take a look at is Acid Spray. It's a pretty straightforward one. You see this AoE here, and that's the cast range. And you can see this blue marker here is how big the AoE of the acid actually is. And you just place it on the ground there, and it kind of makes this green goo, and it has the sound effect. And then you can see this axe here is ticking down while he's standing in there. And the other thing is he also takes more right-click damage from my right-clicks because there's an armor-reducing component to this as well. So his armor is reduced right now a little bit, so it helps with trading, it helps with farming in general, because you put this down on the ground with the creeps, they're all taking damage, and you can farm them faster by right-clicking them. It helps trading in the lane because you put this down, people have to kind of run away from it, or if they stand in it, they have to be careful because they're not going to trade as well with you, all that kind of stuff. It's really good for farming and also laning in general. So that's Acid Spray. Pretty straightforward. You're going to use this a lot for farming, but obviously in fights, this doesn't hurt that badly to just put down, and that gives you some damage in the fight, and also reduced armor in the fight is very good as well. So that's Acid Spray. Then we can look at Unstable Concoction. This one's interesting. It's a stun, but what you do is you actually press it to start charging it, and you see this countdown timer over your head, and then you actually press it again to throw this concoction at the enemy, and then it stuns them and does damage. You can see I'll refresh here, and I can start this concoction. It starts ticking down, but if I actually don't manage to press it on an enemy, I will stun myself and take damage myself. So this is important to know because you have to be careful when you actually start using this concoction, because the enemy will see, okay, this guy's charging his stun, I need to run away, I'm going to try to go in the trees, I'm going to try to go into the fog so that he can't see me, and then there's no one to throw this concoction at, and then he'll stun himself. That's kind of what enemies are thinking almost all the time when they see you charging. So one of the other things you would like to do as well, if you can help it, is charge in fog, kind of appear and it's too late, they can't run away, you're already, you know, down to 2 seconds, 1 second, whatever it is, and then you throw the concoction at them, and there's nothing they can do. And that's kind of how you want to play or function around concoction as well. The other thing to notice is that you can throw it early if you want. So if I charge it here and it just goes down to 4.5, I can throw it out real quick. It does a little bit of damage. It only stuns for a short amount of time, but that's often better than having to sit there and wait till it goes down and then stunning yourself. So like if you see that they're about to run away into fog, you can just throw it right out and it'll hit them. And maybe you didn't do a lot of damage, maybe you didn't stun them, but that's fine. It's, like I said, better than stunning yourself. So that's Unstable Concoction. And then next, this is the passive that this hero got when the Grievel's Greed ability went to this just innate passive, is this Corrosive Weaponry. And this is just a pretty straightforward ability that just allows you to be better later on into the game with a passive that stacks when you hit enemies. So you can see the stack is kind of stacking up there, and it helps this hero just be better overall because this is a movement slow per stack, a base attack damage reduction per stack, so you can actually like man up on enemy carries or enemy heroes a little better than you used to, because obviously without this, then you just have a straight up gold passive that doesn't really do anything for you in fights to hit heroes. So this really does help you hit people and fight them and all that kind of stuff. But it's not something you really think about all that much. It's just like a benefit, a bonus that you have built innate. You're going to level this last pretty much every time. There's really no reason to level it early. It doesn't really help you farm very much at all. So that's just kind of corrosive weaponry, and that's pretty much what it does. But most people don't really think about what it does just in general. It just makes Alchemist a little bit stronger of a hero. And then lastly, we have Alchemist, his ultimate, which is Chemical Rage. And this is a pretty good ability because when you pop it, he just gets regen, he gets more of a base attack time, also more movement speed. And the other thing I do want to mention as well is that he also dispels anything that's on him. So if I press this ability as Axe and it's single targeted, you know, I have this debuff now. But when I press Chemical Rage, all those debuffs are now cleansed. So it's like a kind of like a Slark Q, where now I don't have any debuffs on me anymore. Obviously, I can't cast this through silence, so that's interesting, or not something you can do. But, you know, anything else like that, any slows like Venomous Gale from Veno or something like that. So just keep that in mind. It is important to understand that because this can be good for taking off any of those debuffs if you need to. But a lot of times you're going to be wanting to use this ability before you even get into the fight, because if you do get silenced, that's kind of a really big problem for the hero. So actually, let's give this guy some damage here so I can show you the regen that this actually has. So you can see right now my regen's not great. Let's refresh here. But if I pop my ultimate, my regen is like pretty significant right now. It's 65 health a second. This is really good. So then if you get more items, your regen is going to be even better. This is only level 1. Just keep that in mind as well, which this gets better over time as well. And then you're just hitting a lot quicker as well, which, you know, gets these corrosive weaponry stacks up, does more damage in general. This is just basically what the hero is focused around, which is his ultimate, which is relatively low cooldown. So it's not like he's, you know, it's not this big ultimate that is going to be used sparingly. It's not like, let's say, Terrorblade's ability where he transforms. It's not just like that because this is a lower cooldown, but it is very, very important to make sure that you have this when you're going to be fighting, because when you don't have this up, you just don't want to fight, and that's pretty much the main rule for the hero. Then I'll just also say the Shard because I mentioned it in one of the facets. This Berserk Potion is a good potion that you can use on yourself or your allies, and it just kind of buffs you up a little bit, gives you attack speed, HP regen, and move speed. And so, like I said, with this other facet that you can get, the cooldown on this and this is a little bit less when you are in Chemical Rage. And then honestly, the main thing, if you look at this Ag Scepter, basically this allows you to give Ag's Scepters to your allies, which is really important for this hero's scaling into the late game. So it's like you kind of have hit your peak, your cap, your maximum strength. Now you can start buffing up allied heroes, and that helps you scale into the late game more than you ever used to, because before you could do this, you would hit like 6 slots, maybe 7 if you get something else, get rid of boots, get a refresher, you know, whatever, things like that. But then that was really all you could do. There wasn't much else to use your money for. Now you can still farm, and it benefits your teammates as well because of this Ag's ability. So that's Alchemist. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. Now, the main focus of Alchemist's laning stage is really to hit creeps. I mean, we've kind of been talking about that in general with this hero, and that's really what you want to do, like most carries, in the lane. But really, just in general, this hero's abilities, like the Acid Spray and the Unstable Concoction, it's really all about allowing you to secure last hits, whether that's in the lane or even transitioning into the jungle. That's really what you want to be doing. Now, there are going to be times when you can use your acid spray to really trade with the enemy well, get them low, and then stun them with an unstable concoction. Maybe you have your support hero that's laning with you, help you secure kills. That's definitely something you can do. It's not like this hero isn't a threat at all in the laning stage. It's just that, for the most part, you are going to want to use your abilities as a deterrent to allow you to hit creeps. It's not like you're always going to want to get aggressive, because in a lot of matchups, you're not really going to be that strong even with the stun or whatever. So that's kind of what you want to understand about the hero, because if you use all of your abilities, if they're all on cooldown, or if you have no mana, you're extremely vulnerable. So you just need to understand that it's not like you just want to be spamming these things out. You want to really reserve them for the correct times, for the correct moments where you're, getting the most out of them to enable yourself to secure last hits. The key to Alchemist transitioning out of the laning stage is that you really just want to farm for 15-20 minutes or so. You're going to want to transition to pushing the wave out and then going into the jungle to farm a few camps, and then going back to the wave as much as possible until the lane, your tower is taken or the lane gets too dangerous. And then you're just going to be farming stacked camps, hopefully, or maybe just, you're stacking them for yourself. You're going to transition to Ancients, something like that, for the first 15 or so minutes of the game, because you're usually going to go for a first item that is some kind of farming item. Usually it's Radiance, but sometimes it can be Battle Fury, sometimes it can be Maelstrom. It usually is Radiance, but just depends on the patch. And then from there, you transition into a second item, which is going to be really your main focus fighting item, because you're not going to want to fight before then. Sure, you have a stun. Maybe you can commit to some kind of push early on if it just is really advantageous right next to where you're farming, but you really don't want to delay your item timings because it's so important on the hero. So you're going to maybe get that second item, which is either like a Blink or a BKB or a Manta, depending on the patch or depending on the game, and that's when you really want to start ramping up your fighting. But you need to be careful that you don't switch from farming mode to fighting mode. A lot of, lower MMR players or new players will just think, okay, I hit this 2 or 3 item timing on Alchemist, now it's time to fight, now it's time to push. And yes, that is the case in the sense that at that point, you can start participating with your team a little bit more, getting into a smoke gank, defending towers, pushing towers, but you don't want to go all in on the fighting. You still want to just have these small spurts where you go to farming and then you go to fighting depending on what's happening in the game. You kind of really want to focus on the farming, but then still transition into that fighting build or into participating more, where for the first 15-20 minutes you really weren't participating almost at all. That's really the only difference, because this hero just wants to keep up the farm. You want to get to that 2-3 item timing, but then you obviously want to get to that 4th, 5th, 6th item very quickly, because you can get 6 slotted at 30-ish minutes or 35 minutes, whatever it is on this hero. You can get 6 slotted extremely quickly and be very powerful, so you don't want to, sacrifice a lot of that farming just because you feel like you need to participate. The only time I would really say you really want to just go all in to fighting and pushing is maybe if your team is stomping so hard that you guys can go, high ground at 25 minutes. Maybe you have, Radiance, Blink, BKB, and it's like, hey, I just can end the game now, so we're just going to push. I'm not going to focus as much on farming for the next 5 minutes. That can be okay. That's something that can happen, but for the most part, you want to keep the farm up on the hero, because that's really the strength of the hero. Then, in terms of how you actually play fights, it's actually relatively simple. You just want to make sure your ultimate is ready to go, kind of like I said before. It can't be on cooldown, because that's really the main purpose of the hero. Like, if you just run into the fight and you don't have your ult on, what are you really doing? So that's one thing you want to consider. Also, the same thing is true of BKB to some extent. You're almost always going to be buying that on this hero, so make sure you have that available. And then, really, what you want to do is you might want to start charging your unstable concoction in fog before you initiate, and you might be the blink initiation on your team, so you can do that. Or you can use your concoction as a follow-up to your allies' initiations, and that can happen as well. It just depends on the situation. It depends on the game. And a lot of times, also because you are this tanky strength hero, you don't really need to pick your targets as much as some other heroes might need to. Yes, it's good to pick your targets as a carry hero. You don't just always want to go on like the tankiest frontliner or something like that. But sometimes Alch might be the initiation. Alch might be the tank on his team that facilitates all his teammates being able to cast spells and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you just kind of want to jump in, go on the first guy, burst him full to 0, or get him really low, take him out of the fight to some extent, and then soak up a lot of damage for the enemy, or a lot of attention attention from the enemy for your allies, and that can happen. It just really is matchup specific. And then later on in the game, that will probably become your role more and more as you fall off as much, as a right clicker. You're not as much of a right clicker later into the game. You'll fall off a little bit from there, but you will still be tanky. You'll still be able to throw out stuns, do all these kinds of things, and you'll still have some threat, but not as much as like the super late game carries that start really right clicking hard. You're not going to man up against them in the 50-minute mark or something like that. So hopefully you can close out the game before then, but if it does go extremely late, then at that point you just buy 7-8 items. You start buying refresher shards, moon shards, ag scepters for your teammates, and that's kind of when you can start helping your teammates get even better, and you're still going to be farming the whole time from there. So just because you fall off a little bit yourself doesn't mean that you're going to be completely useless in the late game, maybe like you used to be back in the day. And that, everyone, is my Alchemist guide. So if you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.